Ahead of Oregon's first game against Idaho, a great sight at practice.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which is brought to you today by 5 Hour Energy. They fix tired fast. They just do. They've got zero sugar, convenient, portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB. Get 20% off your order. Offer only valid till September 30th on one order. Cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Implications of that Ohio State game on October 12th. And the fourth and final episode of that team out west was magnificent and wholesome. And I'll talk about that on today's show. But a most glorious sight and an unexpected one at that. Pictures and reports were flying in from those on the ground at Oregon's practice. As you can probably see, I am not. I'm in a hotel room in Salt Lake City getting ready for Southern Utah's opening game Thursday night at Rice-Eccles Stadium, a place many of you are familiar with, against the Utes, a Big 12 team, because, of course. But Matthew Bedford was in pads, had a knee brace on, was practicing. Now, his availability up in the air for Saturday's game against Idaho, he does not need to play. Yes, by the time Oregon plays Ohio State on October 12th, I'd like for Matthew Bedford to have played at least a couple of games. Chemistry along the offensive line, that's an important thing to develop. When you have a lot of turnover in there, like if you have turnover in a running back room or a receiver room, those guys operate independently, more so than along the offensive line, where your timing has to be right. Your communication has to be really solid. It's not as much of an individualized position. And Bedford, though he comes in from Indiana as a sixth-year college football player, certainly knows what it's like to play at a high level and has been in the Big Ten for the last several seasons and was a solid player for the Hoosiers. I just feel better if he had a couple of games to work himself into that offensive line rotation. So he was at practice. That is not something I expected to see. The verbiage from Dan Lanning, I believe it was, giving a quote talking about Bedford's injury originally was, we hope he plays at some point this season, or at least that's what James Creppy of the Oregonian had tweeted out, that, they hope he plays at some point this season. And I was looking at that going, that gives me Justin Jacobs vibes. He's not coming back till halfway through the season. Is he coming back later than halfway in the season? But seeing him at practice already, that's a great sign. If he is ready to go and able to play by the time Oregon takes on UCLA in their first Big Ten game in the last week of September, then Oregon will be in good shape. And I feel great about this offensive line. And going into the game against Idaho, he doesn't need to play, doesn't need to push it. I think against Boise State and Oregon State, those teams are going to, provide much more of a challenge than I think Idaho will on Saturday. But overall, this is just a great piece of news, because certainly if you're in pads and practicing, you're not several and many weeks away. I don't know why you'd be several and many. You can't be several or many, but you're not a long ways away. That's an indication, at least. Nothing has been confirmed. I wouldn't expect him to play. Like I said, don't think he needs to play on Saturday against Idaho. Oregon doesn't need him for that sort of matchup. But would I rather have him against Boise State than not? Yeah, I would. Boise State, they're the preseason favorites in the Mountain West. They're trying to be a playoff team this year. They've got big aspirations. They know the importance of the Oregon game. As always is the case, next Saturday at Autzen Stadium, Oregon's going to get Boise State's best swing. So I'd love to have him for that game. But it was just a great sign, and it was an unexpected one. And when I saw the photo, I went, oh, my goodness, what do you know? There he is. So a good piece of news to start today. Second part of this opening segment was a Locked On Ducks insider sent me a message. Very simple. And if you are an insider, you get priority access in the mailbag, and you can ask questions like this, or just kind of generic statements. Can you say something good about Trayshawn Holder and just talk about him a little? Well, yeah, I can. This is a guy who's flying under the radar offensively. He's not a newcomer. He was on the team last year. He was a contributor. Oregon fans should know pretty well by now what he's capable of on this just absolutely loaded receiving core. Trayshawn Holden's a big reason why I've spoken in such glowing terms about Oregon's pass catchers this year. He's not the only reason, of course. You've got Tez Johnson, you got Evan Stewart in there, you got Gary Bryant Jr., who I'll get to in just a moment. But I think I'm as big of a Trayshawn Holden fan as any of you are going to find. He had just over 400 yards last year. He and Gary Bryant Jr. were both, I think, around the 430, 440-yard mark. Troy Franklin had 1,385 receiving yards last year, setting Oregon's single-season record. Even if Evan Stewart, the 5-star wide receiver transfer from Texas A&M, has the best season of his career and goes over 1,000 yards, it'd still be a pretty big leap or expectation to say, well, he's going to push for the single-season record. Like, maybe if Oregon plays enough games, that could certainly be the case. But I think that for Trayshawn Holden, he has number one receiver potential at the college level. If Oregon had not brought in Evan Stewart, I would still feel great about the receiving core. We saw what he can do as a number one guy in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. I know it's against a lower caliber opponent, but still a high-end Group of 5 team, and he cooked them. He had an awesome game, and he made the sorts of catches that the number one guy on the perimeter can make. So I, talked several times last year on the pod about how I felt like he was capable of more than he was doing in the offense. But I think the most important thing for Trayshawn Holden this year in the minds of Duck fans is that if you have an injury to Evan Stewart, let's say, who has been dinged up before, or if Tez Johnson were to go down, God forbid, and Trayshawn Holden had to fill a bigger role, he's very capable. I think he's incredibly capable. I'm a big fan, and I won't be surprised this year. If Stewart has around 1,000-yard season and Gabriel pushes for a 4,000-yard campaign, which is what I've predicted him to do statistically in the regular season for the Ducks. He was about 3,600 yards last year. I think he can go a little bit over that and be in the 4,000-yard range this season. I think Trayshawn Holden could have a 600-700-yard season. I really do. This was the number one passing offense in the country last year. And Ty Burrell mentioned that when narrating the 4th episode of that Team Out West, which, as I mentioned, I'll talk about later on today's show. I think that this passing offense can be just about as good as it was a year ago. I'm a big Bo Nix fan. I know, shocker. Shocker, hot take. I don't think Dylan Gabriel is Bo Nix. I do think he's an incredibly capable quarterback who fits this offense really, really well. Joel Klatt and Josh Pate, other college football pundits have talked about how great of a fit it is and how different it is from what Gabriel did a season ago. And when you have a receiving core like this and guys who can make plays after the catch, like Trayshawn Holden or Tez Johnson or Gary Bryant or Evan Stewart, or a tight end like Terrence Ferguson or Kenyon Sadiq or Patrick Herbert, you got plenty of options there to throw the football to. And I think Will Stein is really good as an offensive coordinator. So I will not be surprised whatsoever. In fact, I'll just go on the record right here and say Trayshawn Holden has at least 550 yards receiving this year. I won't be shocked if he pushes for a 600 number. And I think he's got that sort of talent. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. 2 days. How about that? There's an Oregon football game. There's a real, honest-to-goodness Oregon football game in 2 days. Gosh almighty, I cannot wait for that. And one of the games we're most excited to watch this year, of course, is Oregon-Ohio State on October 12th. A ramifications question about that matchup, that's coming up next. Coming up right now is 5-Hour Energy. Are you tired after lunch? Most of us are. Research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. 5-Hour Energy shots have got 0 sugar, a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone, so go try them all. You can put together your own 12-pack or a 24-pack, and 5-Hour Energy delivers it right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5 and then hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to get 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, let's hop back into the mailbag here. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, both ways to get into the mailbag. Or if you want to become a Locked On Ducks insider and get priority access, click that link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. One of you over there sent me this question, hence why it is up first. What are the odds the Oregon-Ohio State winner goes to number 1? I don't believe, or it could be close to around that time that the college football playoff polls come out. I think it's a little bit later on in the season, but regardless, there is a solid chance, given that Oregon's the preseason number 3 team in the country and Ohio State's the preseason number 2 team in the country. If you have, particularly in convincing fashion, a top 3 win to go with an undefeated resume, which I expect both teams to have. Ohio State has got a cupcake non-conference. Oregon's is harder than Ohio State's, but still overall not incredibly challenging. And then the first 2 conference games, both teams are going to roll. Both play Michigan State, and then Oregon plays UCLA, who I think is going to go 3-9 or maybe even 2-10 this year. And Ohio State plays Iowa at home, and Iowa is not going to score a point in that game. I'm not even kidding. I do not believe Iowa goes into Columbus and scores a single solitary point on what might be the best defense in all of college football. So the odds that the winner goes to number 1, pretty darn solid. Pretty darn solid. Because Georgia at that point will have a win over Clemson, who's good, but not as highly ranked as whoever, Oregon or Ohio State will have beaten, because they'll be in the top 3. And Georgia's schedule certainly is incredibly hard. I don't think it's a guarantee. Certainly you wouldn't be any lower than number 2, obviously. But will Georgia have a top 3 win at that point? I don't think so. And if you look at what it takes to overtake a number 1 team, having a top 3 win like that usually does it. Think back to Tennessee a couple years ago. They played a top, I think, 3 or 4 ranked Alabama team, and they went to number 1. I think that was actually in the college football playoff rankings when they finally beat them in 2022, and the goalposts came down and whatnot. It was an incredible college football game, one of the best ones of the past 5 years, or past 2 years in the sport, or even further beyond that. It was fantastically awesome. But Tennessee was, I think, in the 7 to 8 range, and they jumped all the way up to number 1. So I think that sort of win, yeah, you could have a team go to number 1 in the polls or the playoff, or be in position in that spot. I think that for the end of the season, whoever wins that Oregon-Ohio State game, because I think both will beat Michigan this year. The Wolverines, in my view, have just lost too much from last year's team to be at the same level where Oregon-Ohio State should be at. And we'll see if I still feel that way in the middle of the season. It's certainly how I feel right now. The winner of the Oregon-Ohio State game is going 12-0. And I think that's going to be Oregon. They could also just as easily lose that game. It's a 1-point spread for a reason. These are very, very good teams. But if Oregon wins that game, I think they go 12-0. If Ohio State wins that game, I think they go 12-0. Another question on the Buckeyes came in from Metalli Duck, Metalli Duck, asking me to compare this year's Ohio State team to the 2022 Georgia team. I think this year's Ohio State team is really good. Really, really good. The guys they have coming back, the guys that they have brought in, the coaching staff that they have, they're real solid across the board. Not as good as the 2022 Georgia team that won a national championship. Not as good for a couple of reasons. Number one, I haven't yet seen, I especially can't say that now without having seen Ohio State's team play on paper, or only having seen Ohio State's team play on paper rather than on the field. Because as we saw with Florida State, a lot of things are true on paper. On paper, Oregon can go 12-0. They could just as easily go 10-2, and I might not be surprised by the end of the year, depending on how things play out. I do think Oregon goes 12-0 this year, but I think this Ohio State team has got a phenomenal defense. Go look at that Georgia defense. There's so many guys. There's so many guys. They won the national championship for a reason. Georgia's won 40 consecutive, I think, regular season games, or some obscene number like that. Ohio State, as good as they are, I would not take Will Howard over Stetson Bennett, which is crazy because of Stetson Bennett's story. Is, former walk-on JUCO guy, and Kirby Smart didn't want him, and then he won back-to-back national championships. Stetson Bennett is a better college quarterback at this point with the information that we have than Will Howard. There is no statistical metric you can look at and tell me that Will Howard is better than Stetson Bennett. So I like Georgia's quarterback more. I think roster-wise, it's fairly comparable. I don't think any team, though, this year is as dominant as that Georgia team. I don't even think this Georgia team, though they're my preseason pick to win the national championship, I don't even think this year's Georgia team is as good as that one from a couple years ago. Those 21-22 Georgia teams, they were crazy good. Crazy good. And that TCU team, by the way, that they beat in the national championship game, was it 65-7? Okay, they were that was a really good TCU team. They had a lot of NFL guys on there, or a decent number at the very least. And they beat a Michigan team that would go on to win the national championship the following season. And the only significant change that was really made, to my recollection, was that they went from Cade McNamara to J.J. McCarthy at quarterback. Now, that's an upgrade. That's a pretty sizable upgrade, as it turns out. But that TCU team was no joke. Georgia was just really good. And as good as Ohio State is, I don't see them or Georgia this year winning a national championship in as dominant a fashion. So I'll take 2022's Georgia team over this year's Ohio State team, though both are elite rosters in college football. This question from Bud. After a long hiatus, what are your top 3 things to do or see in your upcoming weekend in Eugene? Do you have any must-visit restaurants while you're there? And will you be doing any live pregame or postgame podcasts from Autzen? I'll have a just 60-second reaction video from Autzen to what should be a pretty fun day, because Oregon should win. A lot of guys should get into the game. My time spent in Eugene specifically, though, is mostly going to be short-lived for the game, because I'm staying at a place in Central Oregon that's, about an hour and a half away. So I'll get there, fairly early. I'll be at the tailgate, and I look forward to seeing as many of you there as I can. And then after the game, I'll be there with my dad, and he'll be with some friends that he went to Oregon with, one of whom played at Oregon and was a very, very good football player back in the day, in the Rich Brooks era. Afterwards, we'll meet up, and then we'll head home, because we'll have a 90-minute drive or so. So I'm not going to be, experiencing Eugene per se, but I'm going to experience Autzen, to see all of you, game day, be in the press box at Autzen for the first time. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most. But, getting back to Autzen, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. And then the second thing is seeing as many of you as I can. Every now and then I've bumped into you guys at the Pac-12 championship game or elsewhere, just out in the world. One of you I bumped into at Disneyland, which was really cool when I was with my parents. So those would be my top 2 things. And I guess my number 3 thing would be, just soak it in. Just soak in Autzen. I haven't been there in 7 years. It has been 7 years, which is a travesty, but it's just the way things have gone. There was COVID, and then I was in college, and then I've been working and going all around, and it's working out this week. So those are my top things. Those are my top things to do. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be allowed to do a post-game podcast from Autzen. I will certainly have a reaction show up as quickly as I can. That'll be the case throughout the entire season. I know you guys enjoy them. I certainly do as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And if you want to meet up at the tailgate, shoot me a message, and I'll let you know where to go. That Team Out West, 4-part Hard Knock style documentary. It's all done now. It's all done. Reaction to the last episode coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you, and holy smokes, is it a good offer. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. Anything you want for college football, by the way, FanDuel's got it. You can bet win totals before a team's season starts. Of course, you can bet individual games. You can bet Heisman odds, conference title odds, see how those sorts of lines move throughout the course of the year. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's where you go to get America's #1, not number 2, not number 3, #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel. Go check them out. and then get yourself a Factor meal kit. So fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? They've got 35 different meals, 60 add-ons to choose from. There's a lot over there. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Go get your Factor meals today. The final episode of That Team Out West. All 32 minutes, mind you. If you know that reference, then you are a true Locked On Ducks fan. I very much appreciate you. But this one was focused on depth. And Joel Klatt had a good line in there. And I actually got a question from one of you, is either via comment or via the Insider program. I don't remember, but it was about how important depth is for Oregon this year. And Joel Klatt says that, he says in That Team Out West video that it's more important this year than it ever has been before because this is the longest college football season ever, potentially. The longest one Oregon has ever played was the national championship year. This one could be even longer than that. Let's say Oregon does exactly what I think they're going to do and go 12-0, and they go to the Big Ten championship game. Let's say they lose that game to Ohio State and they're 12-1. That's going to land them as the number 5 seed. They'll get a home playoff game at Austin Stadium. Then they play that first round game. You have a quarterfinal, a semifinal, a national championship game. That could be a very long season. That could be the longest season Oregon has ever played. So yeah, depth is going to be a critical factor this year. And I like that they highlighted certain guys like a Charlie Pickard, for instance, who could very well is likely to be Oregon starting center, former walk-on, and they were giving him all sorts of love. I thought that was really great. And then he had the moment where, when guys are mic'd up, they're so funny sometimes. And he was just kind of alone at practice, and he goes, "I just want to say, Mom, Dad, I love you, appreciate you." And then he ends it with, "I always wanted to say that." he just kind of goes along. But I love this series over the last 4 weeks. It was something that I look forward to in the middle of the week. I think it's excited a lot of Oregon fans and given just such a great look of what it's like to be a part of the Oregon football program. And I think that's a great thing for everyone that is following this team or is excited to watch this team this year to see how do they act behind the scenes. Like some of this stuff was obviously specifically to Oregon new to me because I haven't seen that stuff behind the scenes. But I was thinking about it from a standpoint of someone who doesn't, as I currently am traveling with a college football team and see those sorts of interactions or coaches meetings or players, joking around and being like that. And I think it's awesome for fans to be able to see that other side. And a couple other takeaways I had watching this was it looked to me like they were really driving home and highlighting the college football is fun. College football is fun. I know sometimes, when Oregon lost the Pac-12 championship game last year or in 2021, that wasn't fun. But fundamentally, college football is fun. It is a great thing. Yeah, there are negative aspects to it. There's this, that, and the other thing, but it's fun. These kids love it, and they're grateful for the opportunity. And, as someone who spends a lot of time around college athletes, the overwhelming majority are kind, hardworking, grateful, appreciative, fun-loving guys who are happy to have the opportunity that is presented to them and that they have worked for, and they have an appreciation of that. I thought this episode really highlighted the fun aspects of college football and showcased these guys' personalities a little bit. And I thought that was great. The other big takeaway I had was the emphasis on family, not Oregon football family specifically, but literal family. You had Will Stein's adorable new baby daughter in the photo shoot at Autzen Stadium with her big baby brother. I thought that was just wonderfully wholesome content. And you had Dan Lanning's son. And I mean, maybe my favorite part of the entire episode, hearing Dan Lanning talk about how excited he is that his son wants to play football. You know, he's talking to, I forget who he was talking to. It might have been Chris Hampton or another assistant coach. And he was saying, oh, yeah, he came up. He said, you know, I want to play. And Lanning is just fired up. He loves it. He loves that his son, like just there, you know, there's obviously something that has to make you smile just watching a dad play catch with his son. But certainly that seeing his face light up, talking about his son, and then having him go through, you know, some training drills with the guys and how they were helping him out. And, you know, he thought it was so cool to be mic'd up and whatnot. I thought it was great. I thought it was really, really great. Like I laughed more during this episode than I have in previous ones. Like when Mike Cavanaugh, the assistant offensive line coach, has everybody over for dinner, the offensive linemen, and they're showing how much food they have to make for all those guys. I was at the Southern Utah team dinner earlier tonight as I'm recording the show, and we were at a Brazilian steakhouse, which if you haven't been to one of those before, they just keep bringing you meat. When you get football players, linemen, the offensive linemen were at the table behind me. They can eat a lot of food. As you can imagine, they can eat a lot of food. And so seeing Mike Cavanaugh and his wife prepare all that stuff for those guys. But then the best moment of that whole thing was, you know, Ty Burrell was narrating and they were playing off the cards and whatnot. Alik Terry beats a Johnny Cornelius. I don't even know what cards game they were playing, but he throws down the winning card and starts just letting him hear it. Like, I thought it was fantastic. So I loved it. The family approach that they took to this one, how much fun it was, the bloopers at the end. You know, I think Patrick Herbert was standing next to, I think he might have been next to Sadiq or somebody, or T-Ferg, and he just said, should we rob the cameraman after this? And then they turn and look at the camera. I thought it was great. I hope they do this every year. I thought this was wildly fun. Informative for fans that perhaps don't listen to or watch Locked On Ducks as an everydayer, as many of you are, and I very much appreciate you all. But certainly something that I found to be a highly, highly enjoyable thing to watch. Couple of things to wrap up with on today's show. A fun question. Before we get to that, though, something Oregon fans should be aware of. So if you are still a traditional cable watcher, I know there are many of you out there. I hope you have heard. If you not, just letting you know, at this moment, as I'm recording the show, 11:35 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday, August 28th, 2024, Comcast, I have many thoughts on Comcast. Many thoughts. Comcast is in a dispute, and if Oregon's game were on Thursday, you wouldn't be able to watch it if you had the basic cable package that they have. There's a dispute, essentially, and it has not been settled. I suspect it'll get settled. If you have YouTube TV, which is a great product, if you have YouTube TV, this does not affect you. But if you have traditional cable and Comcast and you're trying to watch the game this Saturday on Big Ten Network, you need to just be following along with the updates here. That's my biggest suggestion, and the PSA I'm putting out there is read the articles on it from people who are covering this stuff. Canzano had a piece that went out recently. Go check that out. If you can't find the link, let me know, and I can shoot it your way. But stay up to date with it, because you want to be able to watch the game. Obviously, like, you know, Jerry and Jorgie on the radio call, that's like they're a fantastic tandem. And you know, I've had Jorgie on the show before and met him a couple times. Like he's an awesome guy. He and Jerry do a great job. I think everybody knows that. But you want to watch the game. You want to watch the game on TV, and everybody understands that. So make sure you're keeping up to date with whether they have figured this out. And if they don't by Saturday, which would be a colossal failure for the 4 new West Coast teams coming into the Big Ten, then try to find a way to watch the game, or find somebody who's got a friend who's got YouTube TV or something of that particular nature. So wanted to make sure that every Oregon fan out there that I can get in touch with has been made aware of that if you have not seen it in the last couple of days. Again, my guess is it gets resolved, because it would be a PR nightmare to not carry the games in the region where the teams are actually playing. But Comcast is not great. That is all I will say. All right, fun question here from MoodyMan22. Asked this last year, going to ask it again this year, because I just had my fantasy draft last night. I had mine a couple days ago. You can pick your own fantasy football team, college edition. Who's your QB, RB1, RB2, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, tight end, defense / special teams, and kicker. Can't wait for Saturday. Go Ducks. In all of college football, if I were drafting a college fantasy team, QB1, Jalen Milroe. Got to have the rushing yards factor. I also thought about Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. They put up a bunch of numbers, but the legs component, I went Jalen Milroe. Running backs, Trevor Etienne at Georgia and Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. I think Etienne is going to have a huge year. Receivers, Luther Burden, Missouri, Tetairoa McMillan at Arizona. They're both going to have probably 1,300 to 1,400 yard seasons this year. Tight end, Colston Loveland at Michigan. Really, really good football player. I'll take Georgia's defense, and I'll take Graham Nicholson, the kicker at Bama, who transferred from Miami of Ohio, that led to the Miami of Ohio football coach saying that they stole our kicker. So just for that fun factor. And he also happens to be a really, really good player. A look at Idaho is coming tomorrow with, hopefully, my guy Max Torres of the Duck Stitch podcast. Make sure you catch that. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On College Football your second. I host, giving you the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth every single day, and reaction shows to games that are not Oregon all throughout the season. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.